Robert Harrison sat in his black Mercedes, hands gripping the steering wheel even though the engine was off. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a few cars scattered here and there under the yellow streetlights. He stared at the children's hospital building in front of him, its windows glowing warm against the dark evening sky. 15 years. 15 years since that terrible day. 15 years since he lost his little girl. Every year on this date he came here. Not inside. He could never bring himself to walk through those doors. Just sitting here in the parking lot felt like torture enough. But somehow he needed to be close to a place where children were fighting to live, where parents still had hope. Maybe it made him feel connected to his daughter somehow. Maybe it was his way of punishing himself. The tears came suddenly like they always did. Robert didn't fight them anymore. He let them roll down his face, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His daughter had been only 4 years old. 4. She barely had a chance to live. The accident had been so fast. One moment they were driving home from her ballet class. The next moment their car was skidding off the road, crashing through a barrier and plunging toward the river below. He remembered the impact, the cold water rushing in, and then nothing. When he woke up in the hospital, they told him he'd been pulled from the wreckage. But his daughter was gone. They searched for days, weeks even. They never found her body. Everyone said she must have been swept away by the current, that the river had taken her. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He'd built an empire after that, buying properties, developing buildings, making more money than he knew what to do with. People called him successful. They didn't know he would trade it all, every single dollar, just to hear his daughter's laugh one more time. A tap on the window made him jump. He turned to see a young woman standing outside his car, bent down slightly to look at him. She appeared to be around 19 or 20, wearing a faded jacket over cleaning company uniform, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was carrying a bucket with cleaning supplies, probably heading to or from a night shift job. Robert quickly wiped his face and waved her away. The last thing he needed was someone bothering him, asking if he was okay, offering sympathy they didn't mean. But the young woman didn't leave. Instead, she walked a few steps away and sat down on the curb near his car, placing her bucket beside her. She didn't look at him, didn't say anything. She just sat there. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Robert kept glancing at her through his rearview mirror. What was she doing? Why wasn't she leaving? Finally, his curiosity got the better of him. He rolled down his window halfway. "Do you need something?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. The young woman turned to look at him. Her face was kind, with eyes that seemed older than her years. "No, sir, I'm good. Just thought you might need someone nearby. Sometimes when people are hurting real bad, being completely alone makes it worse." Robert felt something crack inside his chest. This stranger, this young woman who probably had her own problems to deal with, was sitting on a cold curb in a parking lot because she thought he needed someone. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had shown him such simple, genuine kindness. "You can go," he said, but his voice was softer now. "I'm fine." "I know you're not fine, sir. And that's okay. You don't have to be fine all the time." She pulled her jacket tighter around herself. "I lost someone too. My mama when I was real little. I don't remember her much, but every year on her birthday I feel like there's this heavy weight sitting on my chest. Like I can't breathe right." Robert found himself rolling the window all the way down. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you. I'm sorry for whatever's making you hurt tonight." There was a long pause. Then, almost without meaning to, Robert started talking. He told her about the accident, about his daughter, about how 15 years felt like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. The young woman listened without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes or telling him it would get better. She just listened. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "Your daughter knew you loved her. That's what matters. Kids know these things even when they're little." "How can you be sure?" Robert asked, surprised by how desperately he wanted her answer. "Because you're here, aren't you? 15 years later and you're still here, still remembering her, still loving her. That kind of love doesn't just disappear. It stays in the world somehow." "I believe that." They talked for almost an hour. Robert learned that her name was Tanya, that she worked 3 different jobs to take care of her grandmother who had raised her, that she cleaned offices at night and worked at a grocery store during the day. Despite having so little, she spoke about her life with gratitude rather than bitterness. My grandmother always tells me that hard times either make you bitter or better, Tanya said. I'm trying real hard to choose better. As their conversation wound down, Tanya stood up and picked up her bucket. I should get going. I've got 2 more buildings to clean tonight. But sir, if you don't mind me saying, your daughter wouldn't want you to spend every year drowning in sadness. She'd want you to remember the good times too, the joy you had together. Robert felt tears prickling his eyes again, but this time they weren't just from grief. Thank you. Really, I don't even know you, but thank you. Sometimes strangers are easier to talk to, Tanya said with a small smile. We don't have any expectations of each other. Before she could walk away, Robert reached for his wallet. He pulled out several $100 bills. Please take this. For your grandmother's medical bills. Tanya's eyes widened. Oh no, sir, I couldn't. Please. You gave me something tonight that money can't buy. Let me help you, even if it's just a little. Tanya hesitated, then accepted the money with trembling hands. God bless you, sir. You don't know what this means. We've been behind on so many bills. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. If you ever need anything, a better job, help with medical expenses, anything, call me. I mean it. Tanya took the card, studying it with surprise. Robert Harrison. Harrison Properties. You're that Mr. Harrison? The one who owns half the buildings downtown? Just call me Robert. And yes, that's me. I'll definitely call you sir, I mean Robert. Thank you. Thank you so much. She clutched the money and the card to her chest. I hope you find some peace tonight. I really do. As Robert watched her walk away into the darkness, her bucket swinging at her side, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly, but something close to it. Maybe hope. Maybe just the smallest crack in the wall of grief he'd built around himself. He started his car and pulled out of the parking lot. For the first time in 15 years, he didn't feel quite so alone with his pain. A complete stranger had sat on a cold curb just to keep him company. The world still had good people in it. His daughter would have liked Tanya, he thought. She would have liked her very much. 3 weeks passed before Robert heard from Tanya again. He'd almost forgotten about that night in the parking lot, pushing it to the back of his mind along with all the other painful memories he tried not to think about during his busy days. Then his secretary buzzed him one afternoon. Mr. Harrison, there's a young woman here to see you. She says you gave her your card. Her name is Tanya Brooks. Robert looked up from the contracts he'd been reviewing. Send her in. Tanya walked into his office looking nervous, her hands clasped in front of her. She was wearing nicer clothes than the cleaning uniform from before, but they were still clearly secondhand. A pressed blouse and slacks that didn't quite fit right. She looked around his massive office with wide eyes, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the expensive furniture, the original artwork on the walls. This is, wow, she said softly. I knew you were successful, but this is something else. Robert smiled and gestured to a chair. Please sit down. How's your grandmother doing? Better, thank you. That money you gave us, it helped so much. We were able to pay for her medications and catch up on some bills. Tanya sat down on the edge of the chair, still looking uncomfortable. Actually, that's kind of why I'm here. I saw on your website that you're hiring for building manager positions. I know I don't have much experience, but I'm a hard worker. I learn fast. And I already know how to clean and maintain buildings from my night job. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying her. Most people who came into his office wanting something either acted entitled or overly desperate. Tanya was different. She was honest, straightforward. He liked that. Tell me about yourself, he said. Your education, your work history, everything. Tanya took a deep breath and started talking. She explained that she'd graduated high school with decent grades but couldn't afford college. She'd been working multiple jobs since she was 16 to help her grandmother. She was good with people, organized and responsible. As she talked, Robert found himself impressed. This young woman had been dealt a difficult hand in life but wasn't making excuses. She was fighting to build something better. Then Tanya said something that made Robert's heart stop. I should probably mention, I'm adopted. My grandmother isn't my biological grandmother. She's the woman who took me in when I was found. I only bring it up because I just got my birth records from the state last month and I'm still processing everything. She laughed nervously. It's strange, you know, finding out details about your past when you don't remember any of it. Robert's mouth went dry. What do you mean, when you were found? Oh, it's a long story. I was found when I was 4 years old. wandering on a road near the river about an hour north of here. I had a head injury and couldn't remember anything. Not my name, not where I came from, nothing. The family who found me, they brought me to a hospital, but nobody ever came looking for me. At least that's what the records say. After I was in the system for a while, Mrs. Brooks, that's my grandmother, she was working at the children's home where they placed me, and she decided to adopt me. She'd lost her own daughter and couldn't have more kids, so she took me in. Robert felt like the room was spinning. 4 years old, found near the river. A head injury. The timeline, the location, it was too much of a coincidence. When exactly were you found? His voice came out strained. Tanya pulled out her phone and checked her notes. June 14th, 15 years ago. Why, are you okay? You look pale. June 14th, the day after the accident. The day after his daughter disappeared. Robert's hands were shaking. Tanya, this is going to sound crazy, but I need to ask you something. Do you have any identifying marks? A birthmark, a scar, anything from before your injury? Tanya looked confused but nodded. Yeah, I have a birthmark on my left shoulder blade. It's shaped kind of like a butterfly. Mrs. Brooks always said it was special. Robert stood up so fast his chair rolled backwards. His daughter, his Lily, had a butterfly-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder blade. His wife used to kiss it every night before bed, calling it her butterfly baby. Mr. Harrison, what's wrong? Tanya stood up too, alarmed. Robert couldn't speak for a moment. His mind was racing through impossible scenarios. The same birthmark, the same date, the same location, but it couldn't be. His daughter was white. Lily had light brown hair and green eyes like her mother. Tanya was black. It didn't make sense. I'm sorry, Robert finally managed to say. I need to ask you something else, and I need you to be patient with me. Would you be willing to take a DNA test? A DNA test? Why would you? Tanya stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. Wait, your daughter, the one who died in the car accident. When did that happen? June 13th, 15 years ago, near the Riverside Bridge. The color drained from Tanya's face. She sat back down heavily. You think I might be, but that's impossible. That's not possible. I know it seems impossible, but the dates, the location, the birthmark. Tanya, my daughter, had the exact same birthmark. Please just take the test. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize for putting you through this. But if there's even the smallest chance... Tanya was quiet for a long moment, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. Okay, she finally whispered. Okay, I'll take the test. The next week was the longest of Robert's life. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. He kept looking at old photos of his daughter, comparing them to his memory of Tanya's face. Could it be possible? He hired the best private investigator in the city, a man named Frank who'd worked on dozens of missing person cases. Frank came back with information that made everything even more confusing. He tracked down the family who had found Tanya that night, a couple who no longer lived in the area. They confirmed they'd found a little girl wandering, disoriented and bleeding from a head wound. They'd taken her to County General Hospital, not the main hospital in the city. Due to miscommunication between counties and a backlogged system, the girl was never cross-referenced with missing persons reports from the neighboring area. She became a Jane Doe in the system. It happens more than you'd think, Frank explained, especially 15 years ago before everything was digital and connected. A child found in one county reported missing in another. If the paperwork doesn't get to the right place at the right time, people fall through the cracks. But the race, Robert said, voicing the question that had been haunting him. How is that possible? Frank hesitated. Mr. Harrison, I need to ask you something personal. Is it possible your wife had any secrets?
Anything she might not have told you?
Robert felt defensive immediately. Jennifer and I had a good marriage. We told each other everything. Even so, I think you need to prepare yourself. The DNA results will be back tomorrow, and if this girl is your daughter, there's going to be an explanation you might not like. That night, Robert couldn't stop thinking about his wife. Jennifer had died suddenly when Lily was only 2 years old, an aneurysm, quick and devastating. He'd been so consumed with grief and raising a toddler alone that he'd never questioned anything. But now doubts crept in. Had there been signs he'd missed, secrets she'd kept? The next morning, Frank called him before 8 a.m. The results are in. You need to sit down for this. Robert was already sitting, gripping his phone so hard his knuckles were white. She's your daughter, Robert. 99.9% match. Tanya Brooks is your biological daughter. Robert's vision blurred with tears. His baby girl was alive. After 15 years of grief of believing she was dead, she was alive. But there's more, Frank continued. I did some digging into your wife's medical records. I hope you're not angry, but I felt you needed the whole truth. Jennifer used a sperm donor. The donor was African American. She would have known the baby might not look like you. Robert felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Why wouldn't she tell me? I don't know. Maybe she planned to and never got the chance. Maybe she was scared. But Robert, does it matter? That girl is yours. You raised her for 4 years. She's your daughter. Robert wiped his eyes. Frank was right. Biology wasn't what made someone a parent. Love was. And he had loved Lily from the moment she was born, regardless of what she looked like. But now came the hardest part. He had to tell Tanya the truth, and he had no idea how she would react. Robert asked Tanya to meet him at a quiet coffee shop, not his office. This conversation needed to happen somewhere neutral, somewhere she could leave if she wanted to. He arrived early and sat in the corner booth, rehearsing what he would say. But when Tanya walked in looking nervous and scared, all his prepared words disappeared. She slid into the booth across from him, her hands folded tightly on the table. You got the results. It wasn't a question. She could read it on his face. Yes. Robert's voice cracked. Tanya, you're my daughter. The DNA test confirms it. You're Lily, my Lily. Tanya didn't move. She just stared at him, her face completely blank. Seconds ticked by. Then slowly tears started rolling down her cheeks. I don't understand, she whispered. How is that possible? I don't look anything like you. I'm black, you're white. This doesn't make any sense. Robert had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. My wife used a sperm donor. I didn't know until the investigator found her medical records. The donor was African American. Jennifer must have known you might not look like me, but she never got the chance to tell me. She died when you were 2. Tanya's hand started shaking. So you're saying for 15 years I've been alive and you thought I was dead? I've been living in poverty, working myself to the bone while you're living in some penthouse somewhere? Do you have any idea how many nights I went to bed hungry? How many times I couldn't afford new shoes for school? How many times my grandmother cried because she couldn't give me the things she thought I deserved? Her voice was rising, and other people in the coffee shop were starting to look over. Robert felt each word like a knife to his chest because she was right. While he'd been drowning in grief and guilt, building his business empire, his daughter had been struggling just to survive. I'm so sorry, Robert said, his own tears flowing now. If I had known, if I had any idea you were alive, but you didn't know. Nobody knew. And now you're telling me that the life I've lived, the person I've become, it was all just some terrible mistake? Some bureaucratic error? Tanya wiped her face roughly with her napkin. I don't even remember you. I don't remember being your daughter. The only mother I've ever known is Mrs. Brooks. She's my real family. I understand that. I do. And I'm not trying to take her place or... Then what do you want from me? Tanya's voice broke. Do you want me to suddenly start calling you Dad? Do you want me to move into your mansion and pretend like we're some happy family? 'Cause I can't do that. I don't know you. You're just a stranger who happens to share my DNA. Robert felt like his heart was being ripped apart. He'd spent 15 years mourning his daughter, and now that he'd found her, she didn't want him. But could he blame her? He was a stranger to her. Lily was gone. The little girl who used to climb into his lap and ask him to read her stories, who giggled when he tickled her feet, who called him Daddy. That little girl was gone. Tanya was someone completely different. I don't want anything from you, Robert said quietly. I just wanted you to know the truth. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Tanya stood up abruptly. I need to go. I need to think. This is all too much. Wait. Robert pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket. Please, just take this. It's not about buying your affection or trying to make up for lost time. Your grandmother needs medical care. You both need financial stability. Let me help with that at least. Not as your father, but as someone who cares about your well-being. Tanya stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What is it? Information about a trust fund. It's in your name. Enough to take care of you and your grandmother for the rest of your lives. There are no strings attached. Whether you ever speak to me again or not, it's yours. Tanya took the envelope with trembling hands but didn't open it. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. That's all I want." Tanya nodded, tears still streaming down her face, and then she left. Robert sat alone in the booth for a long time after she was gone, feeling more empty than he had in years. He'd found his daughter, but he'd also lost her all over again. The next 2 weeks were torture. Robert wanted to call Tanya to check on her, but he forced himself to give her space. He'd turned her entire world upside down. She needed time to process everything. Meanwhile, he hired Frank to dig deeper into what had happened that night 15 years ago, trying to piece together how his daughter had survived and why she was never found. The story Frank uncovered was both miraculous and heartbreaking. After the car went into the river, Robert had been knocked unconscious. Lily somehow had gotten out of her car seat, probably because the impact had loosened it. She'd climbed out of the broken window and made it to the riverbank. Disoriented and terrified, she'd wandered up to the road. The couple who found her lived in a rural area and didn't have a TV or regular access to news. They'd done what they thought was right by taking her to the hospital, but they'd taken her to a small county facility that was understaffed and overwhelmed. The hospital had tried to identify her, but Lily couldn't remember her name or anything about her life. The head injury had caused temporary amnesia. By the time she might have started remembering, she was already in the foster system and the case had gone cold. She'd become just another lost child in an overburdened system. Mrs. Brooks, who worked at the children's home, had fallen in love with the quiet little girl who drew pictures of butterflies and hummed songs she couldn't remember learning. She'd adopted her, given her a new name, and raised her with all the love she could offer, even though she lived on a modest retirement income. When Tanya finally called, Robert almost dropped his phone in his rush to answer it. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice small. "I've been thinking and I have questions." They met at the same coffee shop. This time Tanya looked calmer but exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "I opened the trust fund information," she said. "That's more money than I could make in 10 lifetimes. It's yours. No matter what happens between us." Tanya bit her lip. "I talked to my grandmother about everything. She cried for hours. She said she always wondered if I had family somewhere looking for me. But after all these years, she'd assumed I didn't. She feels terrible that you've been grieving all this time. None of this is her fault. She saved your life. She gave you a home and love when no one else would. She wants to meet you," Tanya said quietly. "She says it's only right." Robert felt a lump form in his throat. "I'd like that very much. But I need you to understand something." Tanya looked directly into his eyes. "I can't just flip a switch and be your daughter. I don't remember you. I don't remember being Lily. I'm Tanya, that's who I am. I don't know if I'll ever be able to call you Dad or feel like your daughter, and I need to know that's okay with you." Robert reached across the table and gently placed his hand near hers, not touching, just close. "Tanya, I spent 15 years believing my daughter was dead. Just knowing you're alive, that you're safe, that you're happy, that's more than I ever thought I'd have. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I just want the chance to know who you are now. If that's all we ever have, it's enough." Fresh tears welled up in Tanya's eyes. Why did this have to happen? Why couldn't things have been different? I don't know. I've asked myself that same question a million times. But Tanya, look at who you've become. You're kind, you're hardworking, you care about people. Your grandmother raised someone remarkable. Yes, you struggled, and that breaks my heart. But those struggles shaped you into someone strong. I can't say I'm glad you went through hard times, but I can say I'm proud of who you are." Tanya wiped her eyes. "That's the first time anyone's ever said they're proud of me." "Then I'll say it as many times as you need to hear it." They sat together in that coffee shop for 3 hours, talking about everything and nothing. Tanya told him about her life, her dreams, her fears. Robert listened, really listened, not as someone trying to reclaim the past, but as someone wanting to understand the present. It wasn't a fairy tale reunion. It was messy and complicated and painful, but it was real. And for the first time since that terrible night in the hospital parking lot, Robert felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. Not back to what was lost, but forward to something new. Meeting Mrs. Brooks was one of the most humbling experiences of Robert's life. She lived in a small, neat apartment on the other side of town, the kind of place where everything was old but well-maintained, where love made up for what money couldn't buy. When she opened the door, Robert saw a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and hands worn from years of hard work. "Mr. Harrison," she said softly. And then her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If I had known she had family looking for her, I would have moved heaven and earth to get her back to you. Robert felt his own tears starting. Please don't apologize. You saved her life. You gave her a home when she had nothing. You raised her to be an incredible person. I can never repay you for that. Mrs. Brooks pulled him into a hug and they both stood there in her doorway crying, two people connected by their love for the same child. When they finally pulled apart, she invited him inside. The apartment was small but filled with warmth. Photos of Tanya covered every surface. School pictures, Christmas mornings, graduations. Robert saw his daughter's life play out in these images. All the moments he'd missed. Tanya was sitting on the worn couch, looking nervous. Mrs. Brooks sat between them, a bridge connecting two worlds. I've told Tanya she should take that job at your company, Mrs. Brooks said, pouring tea into mismatched cups. She's been so worried about leaving me alone during the day, but I keep telling her I'm not made of glass. The girl needs to build a future for herself. I do have a position available, Robert said carefully, but only if Tanya wants it. There's no pressure. Tanya looked at her grandmother, then at Robert. I've been thinking about it. I'd like to try, but I want to earn it, you know? I don't want special treatment just because of everything. You'll work just as hard as anyone else, Robert promised. Maybe harder because I have high standards. But I think you're up for it. A small smile crossed Tanya's face, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. Okay then. When do I start? Over the next few months, Robert kept his word. He gave Tanya a position as an assistant property manager, but he didn't go easy on her. She worked long hours, learned the business from the ground up, and proved herself capable. Some of his employees whispered about nepotism when they learned she was connected to the boss somehow, but those whispers died down quickly when they saw how hard she worked. Robert and Tanya developed a routine. They had lunch together once a week, always at her insistence that it be somewhere casual, nowhere fancy. They talked about work, about life, about small things and big things. Slowly, carefully, they were building something, not the father-daughter relationship Robert had lost, but something new, something real. Robert made sure Mrs. Brooks had everything she needed. He set up medical appointments with the best doctors, ensured her apartment building was safe and well-maintained, and visited her often. She became like a mother to him too, in a way. She'd raised his daughter when he couldn't, and that created a bond he cherished. One evening, about 6 months after the truth came out, Mrs. Brooks invited Robert for dinner. It was nothing fancy. Homemade meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, but it was the best meal Robert had eaten in years. As they sat around the small kitchen table holding hands while Mrs. Brooks said grace, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. He felt like he belonged somewhere. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks said after the prayer. Thank you for taking care of my grandbaby and for taking care of this old woman too. You're not old, Tanya protested, squeezing her grandmother's hand. And your family, Robert added. Both of you. You don't thank family for caring about each other. After dinner, Mrs. Brooks excused herself to bed early, leaving Robert and Tanya alone with coffee and leftover pie. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, something that had taken months to achieve. Can I ask you something? Tanya finally said. Do you ever wish things had been different? That I'd been found right away? That you'd gotten to raise me? Robert thought carefully before answering. Every single day I wish I hadn't lost those years with you. I wish I'd been there for your first day of school, your birthdays, all the moments that mattered. But Tanya, if things had been different, you wouldn't be you. You'd be someone else entirely, and I've come to realize that I don't want someone else. I want to know you exactly as you are. Tanya's eyes glistened with tears. I've been having these dreams lately. Little flashes of memories, I think. A man reading me stories. Someone pushing me on a swing. A woman singing while she cooked. I don't know if they're real memories or just my brain trying to create something that was lost. What do the memories feel like? Robert asked gently. Safe. They feel safe and warm and loved. Tanya wiped her eyes. I'm starting to understand that even though I don't remember you, some part of me does. Some part of me remembers being loved by you. Robert had to set down his coffee cup because his hands were shaking. I did love you. I loved you so much. And I love who you've become even though I wasn't there to see it happen. I'm not ready to call you Dad, Tanya said quietly. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that. But Robert, I'm glad you found me. I'm glad I'm not just some girl you cried over in a parking lot anymore. I'm glad we get to have this, whatever this is. Me too, Robert whispered. Me too. The turning point came on what would have been Lily's 20th birthday. Robert had expected to spend the day alone, as he always did, mourning what was lost. But that morning, Tanya called him. Can you come over tonight? Grandma wants to do something special. When Robert arrived that evening, the small apartment was decorated with simple homemade decorations. Mrs. Brooks had baked a cake, and candles were lit throughout the room. We thought we should celebrate, Mrs. Brooks explained. Not the birthday of a little girl who's gone, but the life of a young woman who's here. We want to celebrate both Lily and Tanya, because they're both part of who you are now, sweetheart. Tanya looked embarrassed but touched. Grandma got a little carried away. I think it's perfect, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. They ate cake and shared stories. Mrs. Brooks told funny tales about raising Tanya, about the time she tried to give the neighbor's cat a bath, about the Christmas she saved all her allowance to buy her grandmother a new coat. Robert shared memories of baby Lily, of her first steps, of how she used to dance to music only she could hear. As the evening wore on, Robert realized something profound. He'd spent 15 years grieving what he'd lost, trapped in the past. But life wasn't about what was lost. It was about what remained, what grew, what became. His daughter had survived. Against all odds, she'd lived and grown and become someone remarkable. Mrs. Brooks had loved her when she had nothing to offer but love itself. And now somehow they were all here together, creating something new from the pieces of what had broken. When it was time to leave, Tanya walked him to the door. They stood in the hallway, and for the first time she hugged him. Really hugged him, not the awkward, obligatory hugs they'd shared before, but a real embrace. Thank you for not giving up on me, she whispered. Even when I pushed you away. You're my daughter, Robert said simply. There's nothing to give up on. When Tanya pulled back, she looked at him with an expression he'd never seen before. Something softer, more open. Robert, she said, and then paused. Dad. She tried the word out carefully, like she was testing its weight. That feels strange to say, but maybe not bad strange. Just different strange. Robert felt like his heart might burst. You don't have to call me that if you're not ready. I know, but maybe I want to try. Maybe I want to figure out what that word means for us. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. Happy birthday, Lily, and happy birthday to me too, I guess. To all the versions of me that got me here. A month later, Robert did something he'd been thinking about for weeks. He established a foundation called the Second Chances Family Foundation. Its mission was to help families separated by tragedy, to improve the foster care system, to ensure no child fell through the cracks the way Tanya had. He asked Tanya to sit on the board of directors, and she agreed. At the foundation's opening event, Tanya gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. She talked about being lost and found, about the grandmother who'd saved her life, about the father who'd never stopped loving her even when she was gone. She talked about how family wasn't just about blood or DNA, but about who showed up, who stayed, who loved you through the hard times. Robert sat in the front row next to Mrs. Brooks, holding her hand while they both cried happy tears. His daughter was alive. She was strong. She was healing. And so was he. They would never get back those 15 lost years. The little girl who'd called him Daddy was gone forever. But in her place was a young woman who called him Robert most days and Dad on special occasions. A young woman who had coffee with him every week, who asked his advice about life, who'd survived incredible odds and come out the other side with grace and strength. That night, after the event was over, the three of them went back to Mrs. Brooks's apartment and ate leftover cake from Tanya's birthday celebration. They laughed and talked and made plans for the future. And Robert realized that this right here was what family really meant. Not perfection, not some idealized version of what should have been, but people who loved each other through the mess and the pain and the impossible circumstances. His daughter was alive. His family was bigger than he'd ever imagined. And after 15 years of darkness, he could finally see the light.